He was born in a dental surgeon's house in Alton, Illinois, and went on to become one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century. But Miles Davis's genius wasn't just about playing the trumpet. It was about constantly reinventing what music could be. 5 times over, Miles didn't just follow trends, he created them. From bebop to cool jazz, from modal jazz to fusion, and finally to electronic experimentation, Miles Davis proved that true artistry means never standing still. Today, we're diving deep into the extraordinary life of a man who shaped the very sound of modern music. This is the untold story of Miles Davis and how he changed the world 5 times over. Miles Dewey Davis Roman III was born on May 26, 1926, to a prosperous family in Alton, Illinois. His father was a successful dental surgeon, and his mother was a concert violinist, a household filled with music and opportunity. At age 9, Miles received his first trumpet as a birthday gift, along with lessons from a local musician named Elwood Buchanan. But here's the twist: Buchanan taught him without a vibrato, creating that distinctive clean, pure tone that would become Miles's trademark. While his father wanted him to become a classical musician, young Miles had different dreams. He listened to jazz on the radio, transcribing solos and absorbing the language of improvisation. By his teenage years, Miles was already sitting in with professional musicians. At 17, he received his big break, a chance to play with Billie Holiday's band. He was terrified, by his own admission, but he was also determined. This moment set the stage for everything that would follow. In 1944, at just 18 years old, Miles moved to New York City with a single goal: to study at the prestigious Juilliard School of Music. But Juilliard was just his cover story. His real mission was to immerse himself in the bebop revolution that was exploding in the jazz clubs of 52nd Street and Harlem. He quickly found himself playing alongside the giants of the era: Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, and Thelonious Monk. These were the architects of bebop, the radical new form of jazz that rejected sweet, danceable melodies in favor of complex harmonies, fast tempos, and virtuosic improvisation. Miles was younger than most of these musicians, less technically polished, but possessed with an insatiable hunger to learn and evolve. He spent his early years as a sideman, learning the craft under the mentorship of Charlie Parker. These weren't just jam sessions, they were masterclasses in musical innovation. Miles internalized the language of bebop, but even then, he was thinking differently. While Parker and Gillespie dazzled audiences with technical prowess, Miles was already developing his own voice, one that was more introspective, more lyrical, and more willing to embrace silence and space. Reinvention #1: Cool Jazz and the Birth of a Sound. By the late 1940s, bebop was the dominant force in jazz, but Miles Davis saw something else: a space between the frenzy and the silence, between chaos and melody. In 1949 and 1950, he recorded a series of sessions with arranger Gil Evans that would become known as the birth of the cool sessions. These recordings introduced cool jazz to the world, a direct counterpoint to the hot, fast, aggressive energy of bebop. Miles's approach was revolutionary because it was almost counterintuitive. Instead of overwhelming the listener with technical fireworks, he played with restraint, with space, with a kind of gentle melancholy. The trumpet seemed to breathe, to speak in intimate whispers rather than grand declarations. This wasn't just a new sound, it was a new philosophy about what jazz could express. The cool jazz movement that followed would influence countless musicians and prove that sophistication in jazz didn't require speed or complexity. Sometimes it required knowing what not to play. Songs like So What and Freddie Freeloader became jazz standards, but it was Miles's distinctive tone and phrasing that made them timeless. Reinvention #2: Hard bop and the return to soul. By the mid-1950s, cool jazz had become so refined, so cerebral, that some critics argued it had lost its soul, that jazz was becoming too European, too classical, too removed from its African-American roots. Miles heard these critiques, and in typical fashion, he didn't defend his past, he moved forward. He formed the first great quintet, bringing together some of the most talented young musicians in jazz: John Coltrane on tenor saxophone, Red Garland on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, and Philly Joe Jones on drums. Together, they created hard bop, a style that married the sophistication of cool jazz with the raw emotional power of earlier blues-based jazz. Songs like All Blues and So What from the landmark album Kind of Blue showcased Miles's ability to craft melodies that were both intellectually engaging and emotionally devastating. Hard bop was aggressive but thoughtful, complex but deeply human. It proved that you didn't have to choose between art and soul, between innovation and tradition. By the late 1950s, Miles had already established himself as one of jazz's greatest composers and most influential band leaders. Reinvention #3, Modal Jazz and the Infinite Landscape. In 1959, Miles released Kind of Blue, arguably the most important jazz album ever recorded and the best-selling jazz album of all time. With Kind of Blue, Miles didn't just create a new album, he opened a door to an entirely new way of thinking about jazz structure. Rather than building improvisations on complex, constantly changing chord progressions, modal jazz was based on scales or modes, giving musicians the freedom to explore vast harmonic landscapes with minimal structural constraints. The landmark track So What perfectly exemplified this approach: a simple, elegant melody built on the Dorian mode, leaving soloists free to roam across the harmonic space. This shift had profound implications. It meant that improvisation could be less about navigating complex harmonic changes and more about deep, meditative exploration. It influenced not just jazz musicians but rock musicians, folk musicians, and experimental musicians worldwide. John Coltrane, in particular, took modal concepts to their ultimate expression, but it was Miles's vision that opened the door. Kind of Blue wasn't just an album, it was a manifesto about freedom, about the power of constraint, paradoxically creating limitless possibility. Reinvention #4, the electrification of Miles Davis. The 1960s transformed Miles Davis in ways that shocked the jazz establishment. Having already conquered every tradition in jazz, he turned his attention outward to rock music, to funk, to pop, and to the emerging technologies that were reshaping popular music. In 1969, he released In a Silent Way, an album dominated by electric keyboards, Fender Rhodes pianos, and ambient soundscapes. 2 years later came Bitches Brew, a double album that shattered sales records and introduced jazz fusion to the mainstream. The album featured electric guitars, synthesizers, rock-influenced rhythms, and a raw, almost psychedelic energy. Bitches Brew became the best-selling jazz album of the era, but more importantly, it proved that Miles's artistic vision transcended genre. Jazz traditionalists were horrified. How could the greatest jazz musician alive abandon the acoustic jazz tradition for electric sound? But Miles wasn't abandoning anything, he was evolving. He was responding to the music he heard around him, to the energy of the late 1960s, to the possibilities opened by new technology. He surrounded himself with young musical innovators, guitarist John McLaughlin, keyboardist Chick Corea, and others, and together they created something entirely new. Reinvention #5, Funk, Pop, and the Digital Future. But Miles's journey didn't end with fusion. In the 1980s, as technology continued to evolve and popular music was being reshaped by synthesizers, drum machines, and computers, Miles reinvented himself once again. He released albums like Decoy and Tuvu that incorporated drum machines, electronic processing, and even hip-hop influences. The title track from Tuvu, recorded with producer Marcus Miller, featured heavily processed trumpet, electronic beats, and a sensibility that was closer to contemporary pop music than to anything recognizable as bebop. Some critics called it a betrayal, others called it visionary. Miles himself was indifferent to the criticism. He had never made music to please critics, he made music to satisfy his own artistic curiosity and to stay relevant in a changing musical landscape. At an age when most jazz musicians were resting on their laurels, performing their greatest hits in concert halls, Miles was experimenting with hip-hop samples, electronic processing, and contemporary production techniques. He died in 1991, but his influence continued to grow. Every major innovation in jazz, from fusion to contemporary jazz funk, bears his fingerprints. The legacy of a visionary. Miles Davis's 5 reinventions weren't accidents or desperate attempts to stay relevant. They were the natural expressions of an artist who fundamentally understood that stagnation is death in art. He proved that greatness isn't about perfecting a single formula, it's about the courage to ask new questions and the vision to hear new answers. Every major jazz movement from the 1950s onward has his fingerprints on it. Every modern jazz musician stands on the shoulders of his innovations. His influence extends far beyond jazz into rock, into funk, into hip-hop, into contemporary pop music. But perhaps his greatest gift to music wasn't any single innovation, it was his example. He showed that an artist could be intellectually rigorous and emotionally direct, that you could honor tradition while breaking all the rules, that the only constant in great art is the willingness to change. Miles Davis proved that reinvention isn't about chasing trends, it's about leading them. In 1991, when Miles Davis died, the world lost one of its greatest musical minds. But his influence is everywhere, in the records we listen to, in the concerts we attend, in the very way we think about music and creativity. He remains, decades after his death, the most influential jazz musician of all time. Miles Davis once said, "Do not fear mistakes. There are none." His life was a testament to that philosophy, a life of constant exploration, reinvention, and artistic courage. From cool jazz to fusion, from bebop to electronic experimentation, Miles showed us that true greatness lies not in perfection, but in the willingness to evolve. If you enjoyed this video, smash the like button and subscribe so you never miss a video like this one.